United States throughout the areas we now think of as the American Southwest. At the time the Americans founded the trail, Mexico was still an imperial Spanish territory. When the Mexican-American War occurred just 35 years later, most of the sparsely populated territory was so deeply within the American economic and cultural orbit that its inhabitants assisted the American war effort. The result was the capture of what is contemporary California, New Mexico, and Arizona and their transformation into American territories. If anything, Mexican demographics are even more favorable toward consumption than they look at first glance. Mexico's current demographic profile also shows a characteristic somewhat different from the normal pyramid. About 25 years ago, coinciding with higher labor participation rates brought upon by NAFTA, Mexican families started to shrink in size. Not so much that Mexico started to undergo the demographic collapse we are seeing in Europe, or even the tightening that the Americans are experiencing, but enough to turn the bottom portion of Mexico's population pyramid into a chimney. Population chimneys certainly pose long-term challenges, as they will in time lead to smaller and much older populations. But even if the rate of decline in Mexican birth rates continues unabated for another 3 decades, this will not be a financial problem for the Mexicans until 2050. Until then, the country has an ever larger proportion of its population in the critical 20 to 39-year-old age group. That's the people who are most likely to move around Mexico in order to secure work, who are most likely to attract foreign investment to generate exports for the American market, who are most likely to attract foreign investment seeking to satisfy the local market, and the cohort who are most likely to consume and so generate local growth. The mere existence of this group is sure to generate strong, sustained consumption and foreign direct investment-led growth across Mexico. The clipping of the pyramid's base, which means that Mexico has fewer children than in years past, has one other impact. It means that Mexico's young adults have greater amounts of disposable income. They are not raising as many kids, freeing up Mexico's young adults to spend just like the Europeans did during the 1990s and 2000s. However, since the inward investment reaching Mexico is foreign-directed and pouring into infrastructure and industrial plant rather than simple credit, the Mexicans will walk out on the other side of this process being richer and not being in debt, rather than simply feeling richer and being in debt like the Southern Europeans. Collectively, this makes Mexico one of only a handful of countries in an increasingly demographically inverted world that can still rely upon domestically driven growth and channel foreign capital in a productive manner. 4. The drug war has improved Mexico's economic prospects. It is something of a grim irony that the drug war is perhaps the best thing that has happened to Mexico from an economic point of view. Now that requires a bit of explanation. Bear in mind that it is the differential between Mexican and American labor costs that provides Mexico with economic opportunities that its geography would otherwise deny it. That differential is the Mexican economy's lifeblood. Nothing pushes down Mexican labor costs, increasing the differential, like a drug war raging throughout the country. In fact, the more violent the war, the lower Mexican labor costs, and so the greater the Mexican-American differential and the more attractive Mexico becomes to foreign direct investment seeking an advantage in the American market. Obviously, the war's security challenges pose any number of problems, but the drug war is not raging everywhere. Mexican drug violence is deep and endemic, but it follows the conflicts of the politics of the cartel wars. Violence is only the rule where the cartels find themselves competing for the same transport routes and choke points, such as the plazas where they can smuggle drugs across the border into the United States. Outside of those danger zones, Mexico is just another developing country, and far from being random, its dangers can be planned for and mitigated. So long as the drug war rages, the economics of integration with the American market only improve. Taken together, this mix of local and regional geographies and local and global demographics turns Mexico from a basket case to a near best case. Because of Mexico's proximity to the United States, it is typically one of the world's top destinations for foreign direct investment, FDI, enabling Mexico to sidestep the very capital problem that will soon be gutting the vast bulk of the developing world. Put together, Mexico is poised to be the fastest growing economy in the world for the next generation. Portfolio investors, in contrast, find Mexico a frustrating, frightening, and even outright disgusting place to operate, because the oligarchs' territoriality persists in the financial space. Oligarchs control their own banks, which finance their own projects in the regions they control. If they should find themselves willing to reach out for extra capital, they are far more likely to attempt to partner with a foreigner who would then be beholden to their political, economic, social, labor, and land connections, than they would be to seek a loan from an institution run by another oligarch. As such, Mexico's stock markets are woefully underdeveloped, and in part because of the country's sharp left-right divide, overregulated. Barring changes that to date the Mexican system has proven unable to contemplate, much less initiate, the future of foreign involvement in Mexico will be the same as the past. Direct investments in physical plant, infrastructure, and labor, and very little involvement in Mexican stock markets, bond markets, or banks. The nature of the border. Americans think of the border with Mexico as wild, untamed, lawless, a drug-ridden, post-apocalyptic wasteland. Considering the inability of the Mexican government to patrol, much less control, its borderland, there is some truth to the American concerns. But that image of the border ignores the depth of the economic and cultural relationship between the two countries. Even before one considers that Mexico is about to experience economic breakout, Mexico's proximity to the United States has not only landed it with the status of one of the world's major economies, but is about to make it America's greatest ever economic partner. Consider the following. As of 2014, the United States exports to Mexico over 2 billion cubic feet of natural gas and nearly 1 million BPD of refined fuels, while Mexico ships 1 million BPD of crude north. By 2020, American shipments of natural gas will at least quadruple, making it the largest bilateral energy relationship in human history. As of 2013, some $510 billion in goods were exchanged across the border, making Mexico the Americans' third largest trading partner, second largest with services included. Bilateral trade will likely increase to $650 billion by 2020, making it rival US-Canada trade for the largest bilateral economic relationship in human history. As of 2014, some 350 million legal border crossings were made. This already makes the border the most crossed border in human history before considering illegal crossings. Projections indicate that legal crossings will hit 500 million annually by 2020. Mexican failure leads to integration with the United States. Poverty, government corruption, drug-related violence, environmental catastrophe, and weak infrastructure all increase internal Mexican labor mobility and decrease Mexican labor costs. The bigger the labor cost differential with the United States, the more economic integration between Mexico and the United States. American success leads to integration with Mexico. Wealth, transparent government, improved local security, higher labor and health standards, and strong infrastructure all increase American consumption and American labor costs. Again, the bigger the labor cost differential with Mexico, the more economic integration between Mexico and the United States. Acceptance of these facts changes the nature of the internal American debates about Mexico. The problem isn't so much that the Americans can't decide if they want to integrate with Mexico or not.